Today, by a massive majority, approved Theresa May's plan to hold this general election on the 8th of June. It's happening. It's game on. Are you excited? Well, a lot of people are. To be fair, though, quite a lot are saying, why are we having yet another election? We seem to be asked to go to the polls every single year. But the question I want to ask tonight is, should Brexit be the deciding factor when it comes to your vote on the 8th of June? Now, the positioning thus far is that Theresa May is making it absolutely clear that she's calling this election because she wants to have a mandate. She says it will strengthen her hand when it comes to negotiating in Brussels. She wants to achieve control of our laws and our borders. Mind you, she said that for 6 years as Home Secretary and didn't really deliver. She will also, of course, add in the point about grammar schools in the Conservative manifesto, something David Cameron would never have countenanced. But the May campaign this is all about Brexit. It's all about giving me a strong hand. As for Labour, well, Jeremy Corbyn, and we saw this today at Prime Minister's Questions, he's going to campaign on austerity. He says there's too much austerity, it's hurting the country. He's going to talk about the crisis in the NHS. He's going to talk about low wages. When it comes to Brexit, I have to say I don't, for the life of me, really know what the Labour Party's position is, so perhaps somebody can ring in and help me with that. The Liberal Democrats, well, Tim Farron is perfectly clear. He says he accepts the result of the referendum, but will do everything he can to keep us as part of the European Union's single market, and he'll fight for a second referendum on the final EU deal. And UKIP, well, UKIP are going to fight this principally on immigration against the Home Secretary, who did not do well on this issue, and they're going to say we need dramatic cuts to immigration, we need numbers, and they'll challenge the Tory party. Do you still stick to cutting immigration to tens of thousands a year? And UKIP will make the point that if that doesn't happen, then effectively Brexit voters will have been betrayed. So that's where the parties are. But I'm asking you, will Brexit be the deciding factor when you come to vote? And if you think that, this election is like another referendum, and I'm going to vote on Brexit and to hell with anything else, then call me on 0345 6060973. If you think that low wages, the NHS, free school meals, if they're your issues, then text at 84850. If, frankly, you're finding it really difficult to muster much enthusiasm for even voting at all in this election, then of course you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch the show live on LBC's Facebook page now, and I'll go straight to our first caller, Lee from Bedford. Lee, is this for you a Brexit election? Is it like another referendum? Will it be the biggest issue, biggest factor that decides where you're going to vote?
Well, Nigel, it's going to be half and half.
Right. So half Brexit.
Yep.
And what's the other half for you?
Other things like NHS, education, defence,
Yep.
foreign aid. Hopefully Theresa May will scrap the 0.7% that Cameron put in and use it towards the NHS.
Right, so you're leaning towards Theresa May before we even start, are you?
A little bit.
A little bit, right. And, OK, so you're 50-50, so you're really going to treat this like a normal general election, but you would accept that the biggest single factor is Brexit?
Yes.
Fine. Lee, thank you very much indeed. Perfectly clear. Neil in Fulham, is Brexit the issue for you in this election, or do other things really turn you on?
Nigel, I'm first going to say, what a pleasure it is to meet you, and what an amazing thing you've done for our country.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Neil. Thank you.
For 40 years. Thank you very much. No, Theresa May has already set the goalpost. She's defined it as Brexit being the main issue, to give her the power that she needs and the strength behind her to get legislation through. Now, I think UKIP has to find MPs, suitable prospective MPs to stand against those Ramonas, such as Ken Clarke. Otherwise, people in those areas don't have a choice.
Yeah. OK. Now, I get the point that UKIP needs to focus on the Remainers, as you call them. But your point, Neil, about Theresa May needs a strong hand to get legislation through, well, she hadn't been stopped from getting any legislation through. I mean, isn't this slightly a myth that we're getting from the Prime Minister, that unless she has a bigger majority, unless she has her own mandate, that somehow the House of Commons and the House of Lords are going to stop her. Because whilst they did frustrate and delay the process by a week or two, the truth is she hasn't lost a single significant vote. Isn't that, Neil, just the excuse she's using to try and take advantage of the fact that Labour are very weak in the polls, and that who knows what the Crown Prosecution Service might do a few weeks or months down the road?
I'm ignoring those side issues as noise, really. The main factor is that she needs to get this legislation through. It's absolutely essential. If there are dissenters in her party, and we know there are,
yep,
then we have to get rid of them. And this is where UKIP, as I say, must play a pivotal role in putting people up to stand against these Remoaners in these constituencies. If my MP was Ken Clarke and I voted Conservative, status quo. Nothing changes.
Yep.
She needs that. She needs the majority to get these things through, and it's absolutely essential that this happens.
So should she should she, Neil, in your view, sort of purge the Ken Clarks and people like that?
Well, I would.
You would? OK, Neil, there's a real Brexiteer speaking. Thank you. Ken Clarke, by the way, is standing again. He's been a Member of Parliament since 1970, but he's going to have another go. And whether you agree or disagree with Ken's politics, I have to say he does generally, I think, make the place a bit brighter and a little bit more interesting. But I wonder, you know, when people were asked the question that would you treat this election as another referendum, 67% said no. But I still think it is going to be absolutely the dominant factor. And in many ways, I think it should be the dominant factor in this election. It is, after all, the biggest constitutional change we're going to see in our lifetimes. That's my view. I wonder what Tony in Woodford makes of that.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
I just think it's a deception. It's a smokescreen from what's really going on in the country. Look, the people have already voted. We're out, and that's it. Well, I do not agree with what Theresa May has said. You know, she needs to make her hands strong. She can negotiate. She's got 2 years to get things and prepare things. You know, it's just that ordinary people are suffering in this country, and, you know, to turn it into a Brexit kind of, you know, bringing the government back on the Brexit line is, to me, is just an absolute smokescreen.
Well, you know, I mean, she's saying, firstly, she needs a stronger hand to stop her being obstructed in Westminster. But my point is she has not been obstructed by Westminster at all. She was delayed a little bit, so that clearly isn't the case. Her second argument is this will strengthen her hand in negotiations when she gets over to Brussels to do this. But actually, given that there now won't be a general election until 3 years after the Brexit date, actually, rather than giving her the position where she'll strengthen our negotiations on Brexit, I actually rather suspect, Tony, she might soften it a little bit. And maybe the real smokescreen is that this is somebody running to get a massive majority on paper, as it stands at the minute, as Prime Minister, doing it saying, I'll see Brexit through, I'll get back control of our borders, but in reality will do much the same as she did as Home Secretary and deliver almost none of it. Or, Tony, am I too cynical?
No, I think you're absolutely spot on, but I would not underestimate or write off Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, everyone thought Donald Trump was a complete joke, would never get anywhere, and look what happened. If Corbyn can get momentum and bring up about, you know, what's happening in the country, the state of the NHS, and really keep playing that card, I think he could come through. I
mean, that's fine, Tony, but at least Donald Trump could do his tie up straight, you know, which Mr. Corbyn seems to be wholly incapable of. And you might say to me, why does that matter? Actually, it does. And the other point about Trump is his messaging was absolutely clear. You knew where he stood on every issue. Whether you found his views tough to stomach or not is not the point. You knew where he stood. And I asked the question at the start of this programme, can somebody help me, please? Someone tell me what the Labour Party's real position is on Brexit, given that I think it is the dominant issue, and you know, I'll find out in the next 45 minutes how many agree with that. I don't know, Tony, what his policy is on the biggest issue of the day. I think he's got no chance.
Well, I'm a bit unsure, but look, he's got 7 weeks to get something together and to prove that he is ready and is going to be at least an effective opposition up until it's decided, whether the Tories are back in or not. So, I just think we should see what happens.
Tony, you're quite right, because, if this time last year we'd said that Leicester City were going to win the Premiership, Trump was going to become the US president, Brexit would happen, and the Italian Prime Minister would lose a referendum and have to resign, we would have been thought absolutely bonkers. And you're right. In the course of the next 6.5 weeks, there could be huge surprises. But I think for this election to have even an element of unpredictability, Theresa May would have to do something dramatically and stupidly bad and wrong. And I, Tony, just don't see it. But I take your point, and like a lot of callers, Tony actually sees quite a lot of good in Jeremy Corbyn, thinks he's very sincere. We had calls on that last night. Mohammed in Aberystwyth. Tell me, Mohammed, is Brexit going to be the dominant issue?
I think, Nigel, is definitely going to be the dominant issue. However, I think the elections, they might be a bit poorly planned. I'm a Conservative myself.
Yep.
However, I don't think this was a good time to put the elections in because, the country's just gone through Brexit. We just had the Article 50 being triggered, etc.
Yep.
And I think we need more time. And now, I think the real winners of this election is going to be the SNP and the Liberal Democrats. Now, think about it for a minute. You can call it an unholy alliance if you want, the SNP, Liberal Democrats, and the Labour Party against the Conservative Party. You know yourself that for the last 25 years you worked really hard to get Britain out of Europe, and the likes of the Liberal Democrats and the likes of the people in the Labour Party and even in the SNP will block you, and that will give Britain an extremely weak hand at negotiating with Europe. I mean, Europe is weak itself. But if Theresa May was to win with, an increased majority, we could go in there as such with guns blazing and, argue from a position of strength. But I can't see it happening. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
But barring Mohammed, barring her losing her majority, and I talked last night extensively about the Crown Prosecution Service and possibly 30 people going to face charges, barring that, she hadn't lost any votes in Westminster. There was no prospect, Mohammed, of her losing any votes in Westminster. I'm not sure. I like the idea of a general election coming up shortly after the Brexit process finished. I feel an extra 3 years has bought her time. Mohammed, my fear is we finish up with transitional arrangements and goodness knows what else. But I thank you for your point. Right now, you're approves the Prime Minister's plans. We are having a general election. It's happening on June the 8th, whether you like it or not. And I'm asking you, should Brexit be the deciding factor when it comes to your vote? I'm also asking you, can you be bothered to vote? Do you feel you've been asked enough? Do you feel, actually, given that they've got a 20-point lead in the polls, the Tories are going to win anyway, so what's the point of any of it? Now, I always ask you to send in texts and tweets and Facebook messages. Says any fair, I read them out. Jack says, UKIP has run its course. No real option other than the Tories, unfortunately. Well, we'll see about that, Jack. Paul says we need a strong government to deliver Brexit. Max says the danger will come from Ramona's voting Lib Dem. And I asked earlier, could somebody help me, please? Somebody tell me what the Labour Party's position on Brexit is, because I'm confused. Maud Imbued helps me by saying, Nigel, in strictest confidence, Labour's position is difficult. Yes, Maud, thank you very much indeed for that. Richard Simcox tweets in and says, Nigel, you stood down too early. Big mistake. You need to get back in the fight quickly. Thanks, mate. Really helpful. I get two main issues, immigration and police funding, both of which she performed very badly at for 6 years, says OJ. And I get the last one I'm going to read out now is, Nigel, this is an exciting, great opportunity for the country to show Labour it's finished. Also to show Sturgeon that the majority of Scots are unhappy with Indie Ref 2, Andy from Falkirk. Laura in Wakefield, good evening. Is Brexit going to be the big deciding issue for you? Can you be bothered to vote at all, Laura?